Welcome to Prepping for the Studio. If you're a musician or musical artist that wants to learn more about what goes on, how to prepare, or how to make the most out of your studio session, you're in the right place. Prepping for the Studio. Episode 6. Roy and Brian discuss what actually goes down at a tracking session, leading all the way up to hitting record. Also, how do you talk about sound with your engineer? And why is the headphone experience for the musicians so important? Thanks for joining. Hello, and welcome back to Prepping for the Studio, the podcast for musicians who want to know more about the studio, what goes on, what to expect, and how to best prepare themselves. I'm Roy Silverstein, your co-host. I've got Brian Schubel here.
Hello.
Other co-host. Hi, Brian.
Hey.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
We are on episode 6 of Prepping for the Studio, which you can get at preppingforthestudio.com. We're recording this here at my studio, Rarefied Recording in San Diego, California. And yeah, we've gone through a whole bunch of things. And the next thing that we're talking about is actually what goes on in a tracking session. Mm-hmm. So I think we've talked about all sorts of things leading up to actually recording. And now you are prepared to record, but what happens? Well, how does it go down? What to expect? You know, that's part of this whole thing. The ebook that you can get at preppingforthestudio.com goes through all these things. It really starts with a lot of setup.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and the engineer has to do a lot of setup.
Yeah. Hopefully have an assistant.
Hopefully with an assistant, intern, whatever. But it's a lot of work. And what some people don't understand is that in some way, shape, or form, the client, you, the musician, like pays for this work. Now, for me, like at my studio, I keep the overhead pretty low by keeping my rates pretty low, but that means I need to charge for all the setup time pretty much. I do have interns now that do some of it ahead of time, but don't be surprised that you're spending some of your money on engineers setting up. Other studios, it might be different because probably in LA when you were there, was the expectation generally that you walk in and things are kind of already set? Yeah,
that was something to adjust to here when I started working down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could go in as early as you wanted. You know, I was always an hour before the session just so I could kind of have a cup of coffee, see how the setup's going with the assistant.
Yeah.
And mics would generally be set up so that, but then you still had the drummers bringing his drums in at downbeat pretty much. Sometimes they might be early. So your setup, you're still going into...
Yeah, there was still some setup time.
Yeah, and it's a couple hours, you know, at least.
Yeah, or I'm guessing in like the heyday of everything, maybe you'd spend way more than a couple hours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I can imagine days being set up, I mean, including getting sounds.
Yeah.
Now things are kind of at a more rapid pace.
Yeah, as they should.
Yeah.
Spinning all day on a kick drum is
kind of mind numbing, probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's gonna be setup time. You may very well be paying for that, and I've definitely had some clients that were like, "I'm paying for this." I'm like, "Yeah, you're paying for like I'm working here," and it's not actually just the work that you're doing, like putting up mics and connecting cables and patch bays and console stuff and Pro Tool stuff like that. That is what I'm talking about. But I'm also, you're kind of paying for some pre-work that happened before, and you even walked in the studio, or even I walked in the studio, which is like the thought process, our conversations that we had, as me as your engineer or Brian as your engineer, like the conversations that we had, and then the thinking that we did. You know, how are we gonna approach this?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not charging for that time. But, but
that's true.
But yeah, we do, right? We spend some time thinking like, okay, here's what my plan is microphone wise. Like I actually have like a track sheet where I put the sources. I list out like, you know, for drums, it's all the different things, kick, snare, blah, blah, blah. And then there's guitars and blah, and bass and whatever, all the different sources and what mic am I going to put on them and what mic tie line is it going to be plugged into and what mic pre is going to be used and what outboard gear is going to be used. And that's all like written down. So I have like a roadmap.
Yeah.
So I usually do that the day before the session.
Yeah. That's what I would always send the assistant to, you know, when you had one.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'll send an intern these days to like, hey, this is what we're going to do. Come in early, get these mics out, as they progress as an intern, like they can do more and more stuff, get the patch bay ready, etc.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah. No.
as on the engineering side, just of figuring out the setup, what the setup's going to be, and yeah, it's a lot of time.
I think the only thing, well, with home studios now, or it's a little quicker in respect that maybe they have a drum kit.
Yes.
And it's already mic'd up.
Right.
And that part of it's there, but it's still going to need some tweaking.
Yes. Now, so let's get into that, because there's the engineer setup and then there's the band setup.
Mm-hmm.
So, once you arrive and the engineer kind of tells you, okay, drums are going to go here, guitars are going to go here, like people start going into their little spots, right? And then you, as the musicians, you have to set up. So let's talk about drums.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe there is a drum kit already there. I mean, that is a possibility. I have a drum kit at my place, but I don't leave it permanently set up because I don't have enough space to just do that. So, but sometimes people request it, so maybe an intern got it out and it's sitting there.
Yeah.
But you might still need to tune it.
Yeah.
You certainly need to adjust the positioning of everything so it's to your liking, right?
Yeah.
Like I think we talked about in the last episode, like you can kind of, if you bring in your own drums, you can kind of pre-tune them a little bit at home, but once you bring them into the recording space, it's kind of a new ball game.
Yeah.
Because of the interaction of the room, of the specific room of the recording, the live room,
the
with
temperature and humidity.
And humidity. Yeah, which changes things. So you can expect to spend some time tuning, moving everything how you want it. It's nice if you can keep in mind that microphones are going to have to be placed on your drum kit because some drummers set up in a really tight configuration and like the hi-hat and the snare are like really close together, or like the crash and the toms are really close together.
Yeah.
That makes it actually hard to get mics on the drums.
Yeah.
If you can be flexible as a drummer in this sense, all the better. But at the same time, don't create a situation where it's hard for you to play your part.
Yeah, exactly.
I think at the end of the day, it probably makes more sense to lean more towards, no, I need it to be this way to play than it is to accommodate a microphone placement thing.
Totally.
But if you're able to be flexible, awesome. Because then it's easier to get microphones in place and not have them hitting the stands or hitting the cymbals or whatever.
Yep. I usually say to the guys, "Hey, look, I'm going to put mics here, but you tell me if it's in your way or if it's going to make you play weird."
Yeah. Are you going to like be worried about hitting this mic?
Yeah.
Which happens. I mean, a lot of the mics we use on drums are pretty robust for this reason, I think. A SM57 on a snare, like it's hard to break them, actually.
Yeah. 421.
421 on a tom. It's hard to break them. You might dent them.
Yeah.
But like they'll still function and sound fine, thankfully.
Yeah.
Other mics that get put, sometimes on overheads are more expensive, but they're way out of your way.
Yeah.
So you're not going to hit them. As you're getting your drums set up, you may find things that are weird with your drum kit that you didn't notice. So like toms ringing out for a long time, snares that have a ping to it, kick drums that don't sound as tight and punchy as you want, things like that. And there are a lot of like ways to fix that stuff at the source, right? With gels, with dampeners, with tape, towels, rings.
Tape can be your friend.
Yeah, tape can be your friend. The studio drum kits look weird sometimes. There's like tape on the heads, there's gels, there's rings, there's stuff that you don't usually bother with live.
Yeah.
But, it can get weird in the studio just to control the resonances and things like that.
The rattles and buzzes.
Yes.
Sometimes.
Yeah, you may find something is rattling. You may need to put some tape on something to stop it from rattling.
Squeaky pedal.
Might need some WD-40. Because everything's under the microscope in the studio, right? It's very much like every little detail can be captured. And if the song is sparse and not filled up with loud guitars, like you might actually hear some of these things.
Yeah.
If there is a lot going on, sometimes these things disappear into the background and don't matter as much. But that's where, an engineer can help you determine whether something is bad enough to warrant like really going after it, or is it like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really have been happy with these products from a company called Big Fat Snare Drum. that they basically make like these things that sit on top of snares that are basically, it's almost like another drum head.
Oh, it's the ring?
It's either a ring or the whole thing, whole, like covering the whole thing. They not only like control the like maybe weird resonances that you might have, but they will make the drum sound deeper and stuff like that because you're adding mass to the head. There's ones that are made of cloth that get you like a really like retro-y kind of sound.
Yeah. Dead.
Yeah, really dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean they're kind of creative tools and helping you get rid of weirdnesses.
The gels too are pretty popular. I like those.
Yeah, moon gel you'll see a lot.
Yeah, you can add or take away as much as you need.
Yeah, I prefer, instead of moon gel, there's types that are more like firmer, because moon gel is very like kind of soft, and stuff like that. And it kind of over time it really kind of melts. Yeah, especially if it's been sitting in a closet somewhere where it gets hot.
Was it the ones you're talking about, the square kind of lump square gels? Or is that a moon gel?
Well, moon gels are rectangular.
Oh, okay.
And then there's other ones that are called drum dots, or there's so many different ones. Yeah. That are a little more like substantial, and they don't kind of fall apart as bad as moon gels do. So I've been liking those more, but
that's cool.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, all that stuff might go down with your drums. You can work with the engineer, who might have more experience with that. And then you might, there might be other weird things like something called sympathetic resonance, which like when you hit a tom, you might hear the bottom snares rattling a lot. This is like a kind of tricky one because basically there's what I said, sympathetic resonance. So like one drum is affecting another. Yeah. And you can theoretically, by tuning the drums in a different way, you can get that out. Like tuning the tom up or down, or even the snare up or down, you can kind of stop that from happening. Sometimes it's hard to eliminate it totally. Yeah. So it's one of those things that you just have to do your best. Your best on drum tech will be awesome because they'll be more familiar with.
That's the one thing I would say to most drummers is get personal with your drums. Really know the in and out of them. Yes. Like tweaking the top snare, you're tweaking the tone, but there's also the bottom head. Yep. It's not just the top. The bottom makes a difference.
Yeah. I've been reading a book about drum tuning, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's published by the AES, the Audio Engineering Society. It's been really interesting, so look out for that, guys. It's got a lot of really good information about how to tune drums and like what's the relationship between the top and the bottom heads and that kind of stuff. I think ultimately, though, doing it is the best thing because I'm reading the book, but I'm realizing like I don't know shit until I actually sit down and try to tune my drum kit that I have here over and over. But there's some, there's also tools out there. There's either things that can measure the tension of the head sort of mechanically, or with a little microphone, they can measure what the frequency is coming off the head when you hit it. And those tools can help you tune the lugs more evenly, which is usually like one of the first things you want to do is just get it even. And then, if you're going for a specific note, those ones are super awesome. The ones that measure the frequency. Yeah. You can actually like get it to the note you want, that kind of thing. Yeah. But yeah, sympathetic resonance could be a problem. Here's a little thing that pet peeve of engineers. If your engineer is nearby your drums, don't be playing them super loud.
Hitting the cymbals right on your head.
Yeah, the engineer, remember that you're paying them for their ears more than anything.
Guitar players too.
Yeah, guitar players too. If the engineer's sitting right in front of the amp or the drums, like don't go full blast on them. Yeah, because they'll be like, and then their ears might be messed up for a bit. Yeah. So if you're gonna play, do it softer, unless they tell you, hey, can I hear this, full on? Yeah, try to keep it light when the engineer's in the room, and then wait until they tell you to really go for it, to hit it all the way hard.
That's a really good thing to say because it happens all the time. Yeah. There are guys who will wait, and then I'll say, okay, let loose. Let's hear what it sounds like in the room. And then I'm standing back.
Yeah. Once you're standing back far enough, it's okay to experience full blast drum kit. Yeah.
Because you want to hear what the room's sounding like with the drum.
Yeah. It's good as an engineer to actually, what does it sound like in the room before you go in the control room and only hear what it sounds like on the mics. Yeah. So yeah, that is part of the process. But yeah, I think we already mentioned once mics are in place, make sure there's nothing that's going to be like in your way because you don't want to be responsible for breaking something, or you don't want to feel like you're timid in playing because they're worried about breaking something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I thought of for drums. Anything else come to mind?
Yeah, I was going to say, some places, generally there's a carpet around.
Oh, yeah.
You put a carpet under the drums just to be respectful for the floor.
Yeah.
Depending on what kind of floor it is. Your drum throne, make sure you have, that's one of the things I would say. If there's anything you really love with your kit, I would bring it. Mm-hmm. Like some guys if they know there's a studio kit, they'll bring their drum pedal.
Yeah.
And some cymbals.
Right. Or snare.
Yeah, or snare.
Yeah.
Different choices. Snares are always good to have.
Yeah, we've talked about that too.
Yeah, and the carpet. And, a lot of times you'll see the engineer might put gobos around you, which are little spacers or...
movable baffles. Yeah.
Can go in front of the kit to help keep the sound a little more dead, possibly, or for sonic reason.
Right. You might have that happen. Okay, let's talk about, guitars, basses, or other instruments that go through an amp. So, yeah, if you're setting up for that, then you'll want to, dial in your sound. Obviously, spend some time, plug in to your amp, get the sound dialed in. It might be a little different than it was at home. You're in a different space. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you want it right at the source. I think we've talked about this before. Don't expect the engineer to magically make your perfect guitar sound. Just try to get that out of the amp.
I mean, to me, realistically, the guitar player or bass player should have their settings ready.
Yeah.
They should know what they want it to sound like.
They probably should.
And the engineer's job is to get the sound from the amp onto hard disk.
Right.
To record it.
Yep.
Or tape.
If tape's in the equation.
Yeah.
But it's not uncommon to notice some buzzing and stuff like that you didn't notice before. It could be just because you're finally in a really quiet space or you're really focused on it, or it could be because you're around more equipment. Because I know in studios like mine, there's a lot of outboard gear, there's console, all this stuff is radiating electromagnetic energy, and pickups are antennas to all of that stuff.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit in a previous episode, but let's cover a little more about it. So I think I earlier suggested if you can get your guitar pickup cavity shielded, that's really good. But if you're already there, it's too late for that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things you could do. You could, if this was a problem for you before and you knew about it, you could try to treat your guitar or your pickups, because the pickups are kind of where it seems to happen mostly. Mm-hmm. So there's different kind of pickups. There's humbuckers that are a little better, but I still have had buzz coming through humbuckers. Mm-hmm. There's ones that are marketed as noiseless that I think do probably a better job too. I think they're just fancy humbuckers. I'm not sure.
Single coil.
Yeah, single coils are the ones that are the worst.
Yeah. Your Tele, your Strat.
Yeah, but they sound good. That's the problem, is you might use some special pickup that says it's noiseless, but then it doesn't sound very good, or it's not how you want it. So, or sometimes on the pickup selector, you have one setting that doesn't buzz very much because it's actually combining two pickups when one out of phase with the other. Mm-hmm. And since the noise is in phase, it gets subtracted when you do that out of phase summing. But the sound might not be what you want. So it doesn't always work. But this is another solution that's kind of annoying, but it is effective. There's usually a way to turn in the room where the buzz and hum is minimized.
Face north.
Yeah, facing some particular way. It might be weird, you're looking at the wall or something like that, but that's how it works. There's a rotational axis basically at which the pickups are not picking up the buzz as much.
Yeah,
and it's significant.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's about moving around different parts of the room, but a lot of times what I've experienced, it's literally rotating yourself in a circle to find the rotation that has the minimized buzz.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not in a weird spot where now you can't see anybody or you're facing a wall or whatever, but sometimes it is, and sometimes that just what you have to do if the buzz is really bad.
Yeah. Sometimes it can be, I don't know if you're running through pedals, but pedal boards and pedals in general can be a problem. But
pedals we talked about before, but yes, once again, only use the pedals that you need for the song. Mm-hmm. If you're getting a bad buzz, you can't figure out, it might be one of the pedals. I've totally had that happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For whatever reason, bad pedal, or maybe the power supply of the pedal. I don't know. Cables themselves too. Mm-hmm. It could be a bad cable, something with the ground on the cable.
Mm-hmm.
try to minimize the amount of cabling.
Your tubes sometimes can have little buzzes in them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I have one amp that the tube rattles in a weird way. And when you play a D, there's this weird kind of sound that comes out of the amp. And I think it's the tube rattling.
Yeah.
And I have a DI that does something weird too, when the tube rattles.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It sounds great other than that. So I have to be careful.
Yeah. Just don't play D.
Yeah. On that guitar. Yeah. Just don't play D. But yeah, I mean, cabling, at one point in time, I thought like the shortest possible cable is always the best. But then I kind of discovered that some of the guitar players were actually liking the sound more with long cable because it kind of was dulling the sound in a nice way, like reducing some highs.
Sure.
So I'm not like adamant about using the shortest possible cables, but if you have a crazy amount of excessive cable, like that's probably silly. Or if sometimes like you're driving a pretty long line because you might be in the control room, but your amp's in another room and there's like pass-throughs. Like my studio has 1/4-inch pass-throughs. So there can be like a pretty long line.
Yeah.
And that just can be a lot for your guitar to drive. Like every foot of cable adds some capacitance and resistance to the signal. So the signal starts to degrade essentially the longer the cable. So they can get excessive at some point. And if you can't shorten that stuff up, then you might look at using a little buffer pedal that kind of like goes like maybe guitar straight into the buffer pedal and then drive everything, because it's got like a little driver circuit in there that can like push the signal better through all that resistance and capacitance.
Yeah.
So I've had that improve the signal quality.
Do you have one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The JHS makes a little. Okay. They make one. There's all sorts of different ones, I think, but there's not much to it. You know, it's a good one won't really change like the tonality of your rig or anything like that, but it just will drive the whole.
That's good.
Setup better.
That's great.
It works for basses too.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So yeah, we talked about the pedals. Sometimes you have to make sure the pedal board is connected to the same outlet as your amp, is what I found.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can get ground loops basically. So the ground loop would be when there's two paths to ground. Like, so your amp has one path to ground, your pedals have a different path to ground. And then that can cause like this weird buzzing sound to happen. Yeah. But if you provide them the same place where they're grounded at the same place, a lot of times that fixes that.
Yeah.
So you might have to do that, which can be tricky if your amp's in a different place than you are. That doesn't always work out, but sometimes it's really necessary. If you don't have to change the settings in the middle of the song, then not that big a deal to put your pedal board where your amp is.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but if you have to change settings, that's when it becomes
a
problem. Sometimes running off batteries instead of the power supplies for your pedals also is a good move. We were talking about earlier, Brian, the ground lifter. So most amps these days have a 3-prong connection, you know, to plug into the standard, you know, plug in the wall.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it helps to lift the ground and not have the ground connected. Probably electricians will say this is a no-no, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But it does seem to work a lot of times.
Yep.
If there's a buzz and you can't figure out any other way to get rid of it, lifting the ground by using a little 3-pronged or 2-prong adapter.
Yep.
Sometimes that is the trick.
Usually they're around studios somewhere.
Yes, I definitely have some.
Yeah. I think I actually carry some with me.
Yeah. So you might want to carry some with you as a guitar player or bass player.
And hopefully guitar players, bass players all know how to mute their instrument. You know, I think that's more like in their playing.
Yes.
You know, so that you're not...
When you're touching the strings, you ground the strings, basically. Yeah. If you're not touching them, they're kind of floating.
Yeah.
And that's when you tend to pick up more radiated junk onto your signal. So it helps to always kind of be touching the strings. It depends on the guitar. If that's happening with your guitar, it actually could be a sign that there's a grounding issue with your guitar. But yeah, good point.
There's like a unspoken sense of being respectful for the other people in the room sometimes. I think, you know, like playing drums when you have your engineers right next to the kit is a no-no.
Yeah.
You know, playing your guitar when somebody's in your amp room or just learning to keep your instrument quiet when
Yeah, because conversations might be happening.
Yeah, conversations are going on. Maybe they're talking about the B section of the song and somebody's over here noodling.
Yeah.
Like they're at Guitar Center. It's like you're trying to scream over the top of that.
Yeah, super annoying.
Yeah, or over headphones too, which is, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, if worse comes to worse, there's some other things you could try. There's a pedal from Electro Harmonics called the Hum Debugger that does a pretty good job of removing hum, but it does change the tone, so it might be no go.
Yeah.
There's another one that I have sitting over here that I haven't tried out yet. ISP Decimator. I don't know. My intern told me I should check it out. So there's stuff like that out there that may work for you. And then, you know, sometimes like you're like, oh man, this buzz. And the engineer could maybe tell you, you know what? That's not very bad.
Yeah, right.
It's not as bad as you think.
Right.
Especially when you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Your signal is way louder than the buzz.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just not as bad as you think it is, and you can defer to the engineer because they have some experience to know like that level of buzz, that level of signal to noise ratio is fine.
Yeah.
It will be something that you will not hear while you're playing, and when you're not playing, I will mute it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And otherwise, there's some great plugins that some of us have, like Isotope makes this RX series of plugins, and one of the tools in there is a denoise tool, right? Yeah. So if you record especially like a little bit of just the noise, the buzz, the hum, whatever by itself, you can train RX to, you know, listen in specifically to that and pretty effectively remove it from the signal, you know, without too much degradation to the real signal that you want to keep to a certain degree.
Yeah.
So I use that quite a bit because at the end of the day, hums and buzzes sneak in there, and
yeah, totally.
Know, especially like, you know, ringing out on the last chord of the song or something like that, you might, you know, notice it more, and so you might have to like apply some RX like more heavily just at a certain spot or something. Yeah. So there are tools that the engineers sometimes have that can help in this regard as well. Anything else you can think about for guitars?
Same old thing of like, you know, if it's a buzz that's not too bad and the engineer says, let's go. The most important thing is getting the song and the vibe, you know. If there's some technical issue, hopefully it's not crazy bad.
Yeah.
There's probably a way around, you know, fixing it or minimalizing it. So,
totally.
Yeah. Don't let it stop you.
Yeah. You don't want to spend too long on these things, but, you know, at the same time, do something if you can. Try some of these tricks.
Yeah.
To see if you can minimize the buzz.
Yeah.
Keyboards. Well, keyboards are usually a lot easier to deal with.
Yes.
Unless there's something wrong with the keyboard. But hopefully you've taken care of that ahead of time by doing your preparations and making sure your gear is in working order. Keyboards are usually going to be recorded with something called a direct box, which is a little box that you plug into, and then there's sometimes a transformer in there or something like that, which then can go over an XLR cable, a regular mic cable, to the mixing board or some mic preamp. Sometimes there's mic preamps that have 1/4 inch inputs on them that you might plug straight into. It's basically the same thing. Yeah. So yeah, you're probably just gonna be plugging into that unless you're into the idea of playing through an amp, which I mean, like a Hammond organ often is plugged into a Leslie speaker amp. But a lot of times things are recorded direct for keyboards. Yeah. So, you know, there's different kinds of DIs. You know, some are really clean, some are more colored. So that's a conversation you can have with the engineer about like what you're hoping for. Yeah. You know, do you love the sound of your keyboard? You don't want to mess with it at all? Or like, are you into the idea of maybe, you know, giving a little more warmth or something? Pianos and electromechanical pianos, Fender Rhodes, Wurlitzers, vintage organs, things like that will tend to have more issues since they're vintage, they're old. There might be some stuck keys. There might be some tuning issues. Hopefully you've addressed those ahead of time, but you know, if it's something to check out as you're setting up, like, is this vintage keyboard or whatever it is playing correctly? Yeah. Are there any issues? Can I do something about it right now?
Yeah. It always is.
Yeah. So yeah, Deoxit, we talked about before, might be your friend in the pinch. Yeah.
I think the one thing I can think of that's happened sometimes is a Rhodes will have a speaker underneath. So I would make sure that's muted if you're out in the room with the other band,
right,
with the rest of the band, so that the speaker's not producing noise out into the room.
Right. Yep. Be careful about that. So yeah, that's all pretty much I can think of for setting up your keyboard stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you want to have a comfortable environment. This goes generally speaking, but
there's MIDI too.
MIDI keyboards, yeah.
So you might want to record the MIDI or however.
Right. You might want to record the output of the keyboard plus the MIDI, possibly.
Never know.
Yeah. In case you want to use a different sound later. Yeah, good point. But yeah, keyboard stands, should be good height. You should feel comfortable with all that. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Rarefied Recording.
Oh, that's me. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my studio, Rarefied Recording, and the services I offer there. The studio itself was built from the ground up, from the masterful plans of Mr. Wes Lachaud, so it sounds fantastic both in the control room and the live room. A 32-channel Neve Genesis console holds center court and is complemented by a wide array of outboard gear, instruments, and microphones. Your music will be in good company. If you live in the San Diego area, just head on over to rarefiedrecording.com to learn more and book a tour. You can also hear examples of my tracking and mixing work. If you aren't lucky enough to live in San Diego, let me be the first to suggest the idea of a destination recording experience. San Diego is BBB approved.
The Better Business Bureau?
No, beaches, burritos, and beer. Even if you're not a beach person, who's to complain with temperatures that are very often in the 70s? Even the winter months are averaging in the mid-60s. And being relatively dry, rain is unlikely to get in your way. The studio is very centrally located, and you can get to just about anywhere in the area in 15 to 20 minutes. Even Mexico. And while burritos are technically not a food you find in Mexico itself, San Diego has taken the concept to blissful culinary heights. You can't go hardly 100 yards here without running into a little taco shop that will be 10 times better than whatever options you have in your town. If Mexican isn't your thing, no worries. There are tons of great restaurants in the area, including a barbecue place 3 blocks away that rivals anything I've tried in Texas. And adjacent to it is one of over 150 craft breweries in San Diego. If you love beer, we gotcha. The West Coast IPA style is a specialty here, but we've got brewers doing all kinds of beers, and several have tasting rooms in walking distance. Did I mention that accommodations are available? So head on over to rarefiedrecording.com and reach out for a quote today. That's RAREFIED recording.com.
And now back to the episode.
Vocalists have things to do in a setup sense as well. I mean, one of them would be warming up.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone should warm up, I think, to some degree, but especially vocalists.
Totally.
And if you're taking vocal lessons, you might have already a set of warm-ups that you're used to doing. So yeah, find a space where you can do those. Usually they kind of sound funny. Like I've had some weird warm-up routines done by vocalists in here. I'm like, whoa, okay. But, that's why sometimes you need a little private space for them. But, yeah, take the time to do those vocal warm-ups. If you don't have a routine like that because you're not, into that or whatever, you still could just sing something.
Yeah.
Do something.
Get comfortable where you're going to be singing.
Yeah, that's the thing, setting up your environment also. Like, vocalists especially, I feel like, are the most prone to feeling in the fishbowl kind of sense. They're singing, the emotional part is more intense usually than it is for a guitar player or a drummer or what have you. So like setting up your physical space with a vibe that fits what you're doing and you're comfortable with is important. And maybe you don't want a bunch of eyes on you, so maybe you could request to be put in a booth or put some gobos around you with some blankets over them or something like that, and have a little like private little space if that's really bugging you, that people are looking at you. Yeah. Because you want to feel 100% comfortable. Yeah. You don't want to feel like...
Place to sit.
Yeah.
That's actually probably for most musicians, you should have, if you're talking about the song, you need to give your legs a break. A stool or something around you.
A stool around. The mic's going to be set up at some point for you. There's going to be kind of a spot where the engineer wants you to stay. So if you might want to like notate that in some form. Yeah. Put some tape on the ground or something, like I need to stand here, Some mics are better than others as far as, picking up in a decent amount of range around the mic.
Yeah.
Like, here, I'll demonstrate that. This sounds great right now, right? But if I go over here, you can barely hear me and I sound weird.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So that's what can happen if you're singing and you're going all over the place. You get all kinds of weird sounds. So, like I said, some mics are better at kind of dealing with that than others. But, yeah, it's something to be aware of. So you want to come back to the same spot every time. You might need a music stand near you if you didn't memorize the lyrics, which we said was the best thing to do. But if you didn't, then you might need that. But then think about the reflections coming off that music stand.
Yep.
That can be an issue. So maybe put something over it, something soft. But also you might want a place to put your drink down. So a little side table or something nearby you would
Keep
be
it comfortable. Some warm tea.
Yeah, warm tea. Make sure you have that stuff in front of you, and maybe you've done it as part of your warm up routine. That you've had some tea, you've had some water at least.
Yeah.
Stay hydrated. Avoid drinking and smoking unless that's your thing that you do, and there's no way around it.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise you want to just baby that vocal cord, those vocal cords.
Yeah. There's probably a pop filter in front of the mic.
Usually.
One of the things I would say is, especially I find with newer bands that I work with, is don't mess with the mics.
Yeah.
I see a lot of times like a singer will start moving the mic around, and this mic could be $12,000
or more.
And the engineer's probably responsible, even if he's the one that has to say what happens. Maybe it's the studio's not going to make him pay for it, but he knows how to treat that mic. And so if you need it moved, even if it's like 6 inches over, just call him out.
Yeah.
Let him do that. Same with, the other mics.
Yeah. Basically any mic.
Yeah.
Because you never know. There are mics, they're vintage mics, and I've got one it's gone up to $30,000.
Are you kidding?
The U47, yeah.
That's insane.
I didn't pay that much for it, but now it's over $30,000. It's like,
it's fantastic.
Wow. Okay. This thing is more than a car,
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. So they are out there, these mics that you don't realize are extremely valuable. And so you don't want to mess with them.
Yeah.
For your own liability or your own peace of mind.
Yeah. It's usually that I've seen this happen, or either they're brand new in the studio and they're trying to be vibey and they grab the mic.
Oh, yeah.
Or
very rarely should you be putting your hands on the mics.
Or moving it themselves, and you can see the mic just kind of swinging.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, boy.
That makes a sound sometimes, too, on the speakers.
Yeah.
Back in the control room when you're moving a sensitive mic around. It's like things are rumbling, and it's like literally like...
Sounds like an earthquake.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, just let the engineers handle that. But, yeah, that's kind of like what vocalists need to do. Other instruments, of course, it's just the general, like making your space feel comfortable, making sure you're warmed up, whatever that might mean doing scales, that might mean
guitar players and bass players have tuners.
We've talked about tuning before. Yes. We talked about using the same tuner, or at least the same model. Tuning between songs.
Yeah.
Tune often.
Yeah.
Yeah, generally it's tuning up, making sure your setup sounds how you want it to sound. You're in a comfortable environment for you. You're warmed up.
I think one of the things too is remember that you might be redoing some of your parts. So the drummer or whoever is the lead at the start of the song, do a count off so everybody knows when to come in.
Yes.
You may be playing with a click track, but it's always good to have a 1, 2, 3.
We'll get into that. Yeah, we're going to get into that. We're going through this faster than I thought. Okay, I think we can go to the next section, which is after you get everything set up, you're not ready to record yet, actually, because there's a process of what I'll call getting sounds.
Yeah.
This is when the engineer does a lot of work. Not that they haven't already, but but when you go into a studio, especially with a mixing board, people always say, "Oh my God, there's so many knobs."
That's right. There are.
And so there's a lot of things sometimes to tweak. So there's a lot of things to move. There's a lot of things to mess with, So what is the engineer doing? What are they actually doing? We're not going to go into details here. This isn't a podcast about how to record or all the nitty-gritties of recording, but to give you a sense of what is actually happening at this stage of the process, let's talk a little bit. So number one thing is getting the levels. So microphones, they're called micro because the signal coming out of them is small. They need to be amplified so that they work well with the rest of the chain, the recording device, other things that might come after the first part of the chain, which is the mic preamp. That thing is just raising the level of the mic signal, right? So you have to get in there and you have to start playing for them, and you have to play at a level that is like what you're going to do during the recording. So don't play all timid.
Yeah.
Play at the level you think you're going to be.
Yeah.
Volume wise.
Yeah.
The loudest part is the most important, actually, because takes can be ruined by overloading the mic pre and causing a distortion that sounds bad. Sometimes those distortions are happy accidents that sound cool, but sometimes they don't sound good.
Yeah.
And so your take might be like perfect, except for this one spot where you distorted the mic pre.
Yeah.
So for the engineer to be able to get the proper level, it helps for you to play, not always at the loudest level, but show them what you're going to do, basically.
Yeah. Play with the same intensity if you can.
Yeah.
But also don't wear yourself out to where when it's time to do takes, you're exhausted.
Yeah, totally. But I do find that it's nice to hear the song, play some of the songs, just because like if you play something completely different,
that's true. Very good.
Then, as we go through the rest of the chain here, especially EQs and compression, like it may not apply to what you are playing. Maybe you're playing a whole different register of the instrument.
Yeah. Or all of a sudden he's playing a huge tom section through the whole song, and he didn't play a tom while you're getting sounds.
Yeah. So yeah, basically that's the first step, is just setting the levels with a mic pre, which the basic function of a mic pre is just to make things louder. They do have some effect on the tonality, on the tone of the capture. Different mic pre's have different sort of characteristics, whether it's an Eve, an API, those are two famous brands, but there's so many other types of mic pre's out there. Some of them are very clean and don't impart much change to the sound, and some of them are quite, colored. Yeah. But basically, they all do the same thing, which is to raise the level of the signal. After the mic pre, there could be nothing besides the recording device, whether that be the tape machine or analog to digital converters, or there could be other stuff plugged in after the mic pre. There could be equalizers, there could be compressors, there could be maybe some extra little things that add some kind of distortion or transient shaping or de-essing, or all kinds of manner of equipment, both analog and digital in nature, could be added. So yeah, like equalizer, what the heck is an equalizer? Well, it's basically just a way that you can increase or decrease the energy of particular frequency bands to balance out the sound in some way.
High, mid, low.
Yeah, think of it that way. The highs, the mids, the lows. It gives the engineer ability to kind of shift those relationships between the different areas of frequencies, so they can compensate for something that just isn't there as much as they'd like it to be, or decrease something that's too much, or what have you. Compressors allow the engineer to restrict the dynamic range of the incoming signal, so that helps keeps the loudest and softest moments more under control and more equal. So dynamics are good, I think, generally speaking, like playing with feeling, playing with dynamics, but sometimes it's a little too much. And the compressors allow engineers to kind of control that and keep it more within a better range. Basically, what they do, they're automatic level adjusters. When the signal goes above a certain threshold, they pull the level down, basically.
We have some on us right now.
We do, yeah. So as they get really loud, the compressor kicks in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just more, it makes it easier at mix time too, because things are not going all over the place level wise. You have to do less riding of volumes. Things kind of sit in the mix better. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot to compressors that we do not need to talk about, but that's kind of in a nutshell what they do. So yeah, the details of these things, not important. What matters actually is, at the end of the day, how does it feel to you? What's being captured? Yeah. So it's actually important to record a snippet of yourself, tell the engineer if they're not doing it already, can I hear what you've captured? Yep. Record a little snippet of you playing this part of the song or something, come into the control room, listen to it on the speakers, have a reaction now to what you're hearing. Like, does it sound like how you think it should sound? Yeah. Is it way off? help the engineer at this point to get to what you want.
Yeah. Does it need to be brighter, or is there notes missing that you think you should be hearing? Or
right.
You may even catch something that he's not catching.
Yeah. You know your sound the best. And so if you walk in the control room and it does not sound like you, then you need to have a conversation at that point.
Speak up.
Yeah. This is a critical moment actually in the whole recording process where you can really help get the results that you want. But you need to be able to have some vocabulary to talk with the engineer with, right? You can't be like, I don't know, man, it just doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
It's not very helpful.
Yeah.
So there are some words, and every engineer has their own set of vocabulary, but let's talk about some common ways to talk about sound. Like you said, brighter. Well, brighter, what do you mean? That's talking about like how the lights are or something. But it also has to do with frequencies. So brighter would mean like, I want more high frequencies. I want to hear the top end of the instrument more.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's too bright, and can you make it less bright? Can you make it darker?
Yeah.
So bright and dark, certainly things that you'll hear. Sometimes things get so bright they sound, to me, like I would call them like zippy or zingy or something like that, like where it's kind of like a mosquito, like in your ear, It's like, what is that?
Right. Present.
Too present. Yeah. Presence is another term where something might sound not present enough, like it's like murky in the background, obscured.
Yeah.
It lacks presence, or something might be overly present, like it's blaring right in your ear.
Yeah, and I would remember it's a work process. It's not, you're not going to walk in and it's going to sound like your favorite guitar player right away. There's a lot of steps that lead to that. One of them being mixing, but you've got to work with your engineer. If you come in and say it's a little too present, then see what he's going to do. See what he has in mind. Maybe it's his EQ, or maybe he has the wrong mic, or they might change the mic. They might change the EQ. They might change the mic pre. They might even change something about the compression. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But there is a process though of like, okay, the engineer will say, all right, what about this? And you'll change something, and you record another snippet, and over and over until you're satisfied. Within reason. If it's 99% there, you're probably good, because mixing is another opportunity to change the EQ, change the compression, add some extra harmonics or whatever it is to get more to the sound that you're after. I think probably the biggest thing are going to be the drums. When you come in and listen to the drums, is the snare right? Is the kick right?
Yeah.
And then you have all your top stuff, the cymbals, and how that's blended.
Yeah.
If it's going to work in the song.
Right. Yeah, drums are crucial, always. In my mind, like, if the drums suck and everything else is cool, it sucks.
It's
like, the drums have to be good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it basically ruins it. So yeah, I mean, with a kick drum, like, does it sound too boomy? There's another word that you might use. That means there's too much low frequencies. It sounds like you're in the club, and you don't want it to sound like it's in the club. Maybe you want it to sound more punchy. Yeah, which is not so much the low end of the kick drum, but more the beater part of it, where the beater hits the head. Like, is it punchy enough? And sometimes things will sound what I call muddy, but kind of going back to the not present enough.
Yeah,
thing.
Or thick.
Thick, yeah.
Yeah.
Thick could be a good thing, or it could be maybe too thick. So muddiness is a thing. Piercing, that could be a mid-range thing where some frequency is really too much, or thin, where you don't have enough of the low mid stuff. Muddy and thin are kind of like opposite of each other. Like
or boxy can be like in the middle low kind of area where it's just too much of it.
A lot of problems happen in the low mids. And we'll get technical for a second, 300 to 500 hertz or somewhere in there, where too much of that stuff sounds muddy or boxy or that kind of word, that kind of description. Not enough of it is going to sound like really thinned out.
Yeah.
It'll sound small. And it also kind of goes into this other term that people like to use, which is warm. And that can mean different things to different people. To me, it means having like sort of a nice amount of that sort of low mid frequency and not too much top end, It's not too bright, and there's quite a bit of that low mid, but not too much, and that makes it sound kind of warm. People sometimes like that, and they want to, like, can you make that warmer? Well, what do you mean? It could mean something else. I mean, in the end of the day, like, you need to have the conversation with the engineer and make sure you're speaking the same language and you understand each other. Yeah. Because it happens sometimes where you're actually talking about the opposite things. Yeah. Where, like, big or bigger, that happens to be one like that, where someone will say, I want it really bigger. No, bigger. Yeah. And what they mean is they want, like, a lot of reverb on it or something. Right. Or maybe the opposite, where they don't want any reverb on it and they want it super dry and loud and present. Yeah. You need to make sure you're on the same page. Terminology. About your terminology. Yeah, maybe instead of using one word, use a couple words, you know. Yeah. If you're saying it needs to be more warm, you could say, you know, like low end, like the kick drum low end, or more bass area or something. I don't know. You give the engineer a couple more clues to kind of understand where you're coming from. Yeah. The opposite of warm would be like cold, or yeah. So obviously, opposite of warm is cold, like thin and brittle, and, you know, fluorescent light versus warm candlelight. Right. You know? Right. Like, doctor's office is that kind of cold feeling. Yeah. Everything is, like, very illuminated, and I can see all the details and everything, but it looks gross. Yeah. Yep. Maybe that's what you want. I don't know. It's important at the end of the day, though, that you use your ears, and it gets to a point where you like how it sounds. Everybody's happy. Everyone's happy. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to please everyone in the band. Yeah. But if it's your part, you know, hopefully you can get it. So your guitar, your drums, or whatever sounds how you would like them to. Yeah. And know that it will change at mix time, you know. Yep. There will be some shift in the sound, probably. Improvement, hopefully. Yeah. Maybe some more reverb added or whatever. Let's talk about one more topic before we end for this episode. I think it will set us up nicely for the next one, which would be headphones. Most of the time, people are recording with headphones. I mean, there can be situations where you can be in a room together without headphones, but often it is part of the equation. So there's kind of two ways it generally gets set up. One is the engineer makes a headphone mix for you, or you're sitting in front of this little box that gets sent several different signals, drums, bass, guitar, and you do your own blend on this little box. So, you know, there's pros and cons to these two different ways that headphone mixes generally go. If the engineer is doing the mix for you, that takes that task off your plate. I mean, theoretically, they're better at creating a balance than you are. They're probably done some mixing. Is basically what you're being asked to do when you have one of these headphone boxes in front of you that has all the different elements. Is you're a mixer for yourself. Yeah. But, you know, the downside is, like, you have to communicate now with the engineer, like, hey, I can't hear myself enough. Hey, the bass is too loud. Is too loud. You know, you have to keep communicating back and forth until you get to a headphone mix that works for you. Right. Which can be kind of annoying for everybody. And sometimes there's only one headphone mix going to everybody in these situations, and then it's a big compromise. Yeah. Hopefully, if the engineer is making a mix, they can maybe make multiple mixes, but sometimes it's somewhat limited what they can do. Sort of number of custom mixes sent out to different people. Because if everyone is getting the same mix, then it really is like, okay, we all have to agree on how loud the drums are in this mix and how loud the whatever. Yeah. The vocal. Yeah, the vocal. So I prefer the other system, which is what I have here. Is, you know, I can send up to 16 different signals to these headphone boxes that sit by the musician, and I can send them all those different elements, and they can blend them how they want. The downside is, like I said, now you have to be the mixer. It's only affecting you. It's not like you're messing with the recording. These boxes have no effect on the recording except for the way they influence how you play. Which, you know, is important, and time should be taken to get your headphone mix sounding good, so you feel inspired, so you feel comfortable, and you feel like you can play. So the good news, though, with a system where you have the control is you have the control. You can get it how you want it for you. Yeah. The bad news is you have to do it, and you might feel overwhelmed, but you can ask for help. Yeah. You know, engineer can come out there, put the headphones on, people can play, and they can dial in what they think is probably a good mix. Yeah. Put it on your head. You'd be like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Or I like it, but just a little more of this. Yeah. You know. I've had to do that for people because sometimes it's just overwhelming.
And it's also a good starting place for them.
Then I'll try to do that if I can too. Like I'll go around to each box, dial in what I think is a decent level if possible. It applies more to an overdub session where there's already things there for me to dial in. So it's a little trickier when it's like a band playing together. Because then it's all just sort of happening. You can always ask for help. Vocalists now, you probably need a little extra special attention because a lot of vocalists need a little bit of verb or delay or something to hear themselves how they want. So don't be shy to ask for those things because it's not that hard for an engineer to add a plugin reverb it's not like married to that sound. It's just there for you to hear
and sing with.
And sing with and have some sort of vibe to it and some sort of comfortableness that it's not completely dry.
Totally.
So vocalists take that time to do that. And like again, I said before, there is an importance to the headphone mix sounding good, sounding inspiring.
It's going to help you perform better. I think.
Totally. I mean, a lot, yourself included, a lot of great engineers have emphasized in talks that I've heard of making the headphone mix very amazing for the vocals, especially.
Totally.
So there is something to that. Now let's talk about one last topic, which is latency, which can be something that's super weird. I'm actually hearing a little bit of latency right now in my headphones. What happens is your microphone that you're singing into, let's say, it goes through cables. That part's fine, but then it goes through eventually some sort of analog to digital converter into some sort of program usually, and then back out digital to analog converter, and then you usually are listening to that. There are ways to listen to it before it gets to the analog to digital converter, but oftentimes you're listening to essentially the playback of the recording. And there's some delay through that system. The analog to digital converter and the digital to analog converter and the piece of software that sits between adds some milliseconds of delay. And so it can sound unnatural because you're not hearing yourself immediately back. There can be like a little latency. That's what latency is. And if that's too much, it can be very distracting. And if you're being bugged by that, if it sounds weird or if it feels weird, speak up. Let the engineer know. It's too much latency. Something's weird. I don't know what it is. Because it can be a real buzzkill. It wasn't really so much of a problem in the old analog days because there was none of that digital stuff in the way that tends to increase the latency. It was all just sort of analog signals, which run basically the speed of light. So so no problems there. But it's when digital started to become a thing that latency is an issue. But engineers usually have ways of working around it and giving you lower latency or zero latency.
I have something I was going to bring up. I don't know if this is the one too, but a lot of times there will be the discussion of the guitar player maybe wants to put some effects on his guitar. I know there's two ways to do it. One, you record what he puts on there, or two, you put something on there that he can just monitor.
Right.
So it's not being recorded. And you can,
like the reverb on a vocal.
You can alter it later. So there's two ways about that. You can either print it and you live with it for the rest of the recording through the mix, or you don't print those effects and you come up with something in the box generally or through a pedal, but you don't record it. So there's two ways to do that.
It kind of comes down to how you want to approach the idea of committing to sounds. There's definitely a benefit to committing to sounds. I feel like a lot of people will agree. I think that it gets you to the finish line faster. It's like you're not like delaying decisions on like what effects am I going to use on the guitar or whatever instrument it is. Like you're making the decision then and there, and there it is. And now I'm reacting to that on my overdubs too. Like I'm hearing that, and all my future decisions as the musician, as the engineer, are based on hearing that sound with built-in effects. And I mean, of course, if you use plugins and you just kept them on, like it would sort of achieve the same thing, except for the fact that you always have it in the back of your mind that I can change this.
Yeah. And also sometimes it'll change depending on if you put overdubs or more things on top of it.
Yes.
It may start to disappear and you might have to change it.
Yeah. So that's the benefit of doing it in this sort of like, delayed decision making, is that you can change it. If you do like make the wrong decision, if you're using pedals on the way in, then like you have to basically go back and redo it if you really messed it up, which budget wise might not be so great.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a tough call. I'm usually more for using pedals, also because the sounds feels more integrated to me. Because it's an analog device. It's like built into your signal chain. It's coming out of the speaker. It's all sort of mixed more naturally. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not that plugins can't be good too, but that's just my personal preference. Usually is to have them use the pedals if they know this is what they want.
Yeah. I'm whatever they want to do. If that's really what they're firmly into, that's cool. I probably would be, with delays or echoes, I would probably say, let me do it for you.
Okay.
But if they're married to it and say, no, this is it. I've been playing like this. This is what I do.
Yeah.
Fine. That's cool.
Yeah. But that is a consideration. How many effects do you play with as a guitar player or other?
The distortions and phasers, go for it. Go crazy.
Right. So you're saying delays you often leave up till later. So
delays, reverbs, those kind of things.
You can tailor them to the mix better.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But
at the same time, there's some cool delay pedals out there that have a certain sound, that do a certain thing, and it may be hard to actually play the part because it's like, it's all about how you play it with the delay.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly true.
So there's no hard rule on this one.
Yeah.
At all. I mean, there's no hard rules on almost anything with related to recording.
Yeah. That's the fun thing about it. There are no rules.
Yeah, there are no rules. If it sounds good, it is good. That's the bottom line for me.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, enough for this episode of Prepping for the Studio. We will be continuing on with more about the tracking process next time. Actually, what happens when you're actually like making takes, let's call it, and the different approaches for that and things about that and what happens after.
Cool.
The initial recording part. But thanks for listening, guys. Please subscribe to the podcast, send us questions, comments, concerns, and we'll see you next time.
Right on.
Okay.
Take care.
That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for listening to Prepping for the Studio. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to your podcast from. And don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends. Episode info and my ebook, A Musician's Guide to the Recording Studio, are available at preppingforthestudio.com. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out there. Prepping for the Studio was recorded and edited at Rarefied Recording by me, Roy Silverstein. Theme music written by myself and Ariel Levine, performed and recorded by Ariel Levine. Many thanks to my co-host Brian Schubel and you. Best of luck to you and your musical endeavors. And remember, as Alexander Graham Bell once said, before anything else, preparation is the key to success. We'll see you next time.